Hi, my name is Nathan May, and I'm going to be going over a brief history of virtual and alternate reality and some of its uses. The concept of virtual reality has been around for some time, but there was never a powerful and light enough computer that could fit onto a headset or a helmet. Even before the virtual and alternate realities that we know today, there were other technologies that would stimulate the same effects that a modern VR headset would with only less features. The overall direction of the evolution in VR and AR is hotly debated, with theories on how it will affect the technologies that we use today. The start of what could be considered virtual reality depends on how loosely you look at the concept of transposing a user, which is taking them elsewhere. The earliest attempt at virtual reality would be panoramic paintings in the 19th century, which was a mural that would circle the viewer and attempt to use their peripheral vision as well as make them feel like they're at a certain battlefield or a gala. A good example would be the Battle of Borodino by Russian artist Franz Robod. After the painting, the next step towards virtual and alternate reality would be the stereoscopic photos of viewers. On the left, I have an original one that would just use a divider to separate the eyes and have them each view two separate images of the same thing, just at a slightly different angle. Then on the right, I have a very modern use of what we would use a stereoscope for. Charles Wheatstone discovered that the brain processes the two images from each eye and merges them into a single image. This is what creates depth and can be easily manipulated into creating images that contain depth. In 1838, Charles created the original stereoscope, and in 1849, the lenticular stereoscope was invented by David Brewster. These two inventions culminated in the popular Viewmaster binocular that would hold a series of images and was originally meant for virtual tourism. It was invented in 1939 by William Gruber, and I have an image of an original vintage one. We're more used to the bulky red ones that we would play around with as kids. In 1929, their first commercial flight simulator was created by Edward Link. Being entirely electromechanical, it would use crude maps and motion to create the effects of flying a military aircraft. The motion was created by small motors to help mimic turbulence and other kinds of disturbances. Since there was really a huge need to train new pilots in the U.S. and really no safe way to do it, the U.S. military ended up buying 6 of these simulators. Over time, 10,000 of these units were used in World War II to train more than 500,000 pilots to initially train them and get their skills polished. This would lead to the development of the super cockpit, designed by military engineer Thomas Furness. Furness would work on this project throughout the 1980s, with the result being a training cockpit able to project computer-generated 3D maps, infrared and radar imagery, as well as avionics data, into real-time 3D space. According to Furness, the project would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Way ahead of its time, the super cockpit would allow a trainee pilot to control an aircraft using gestures, speech, and even eye movements. And I found this interesting. In the 1930s, there was a story written by Stanley Gene Weinbaum, a science fiction writer, and the idea was a pair of spectacles and goggles that would act like the VR headsets that we have today, letting a user see a fictional world and be able to see it, experience it in different ways, except this would have smell and taste in it as well. In hindsight, the experience Weinbaum described for these goggles is uncannily like the modern VR headsets that we have today, which would make him a visionary. In the 1950s, the Sensorama was created by Morton Heilig, a cinematographer that was wanting to develop a way to experience a movie that would stimulate all the senses instead of just sight and sound. The Sensorama was patented in 1962, and it would contain speakers, a stereoscopic display, smell generators with fans, and a vibrating chair. Morton would create 6 short films to demonstrate his machines and his capabilities, which he would produce, film, and edit all by himself. And in 1960, 2 years before the Sensorama was patented, he would try to take it a step further and would invent the telesphere mask, which was the first example of a head-mounted display. And even though it was portable, Morton could only make use of the stereoscopic 3D view and the stereo speakers as well. Bringing us to what's popular today, various companies such as Oculus, Google, HTC, and Samsung, among others, which would corner the markets and cutting-edge VR and AR technology. Although some companies have their fingers in both pies, some of the companies that would specialize in either virtual or alternate reality instead of trying to do both. Even with limited budgets, it's very possible to experience VR with a smartphone. Google makes it possible with the Google Cardboard, and it's considered one of the more popular ways to experience VR, especially on a budget. And it would just use the same depth perception trick, very much like the classic Viewmaster. A few of the popular devices by AR would include Microsoft's HoloLens, Google Glass Enterprise Edition, and the Magic Leap Lightwear, among a lot of other ones that we aren't exactly familiar with. And some of them are still in productions to try and build a solid foundation and to cultivate software available for these futuristic glasses. And the Google Cardboard is the only one so far with a very wide range of VR and AR apps to go with their product. A very popular way of experiencing AR would be Pokemon Go. It was the first popular AR smartphone game, and it would use the surroundings just like AR does to let users experience catching Pokemon themselves. Some of the differences that we have between VR and AR is that VR transposes the users, which would take them to a completely new place. And generally it would need to be tethered to a desktop computer or something that can process all the graphics and everything that's needed for these heavy games. And it would also let them experience these games with more features, like with controllers that would let them have hands in the games, or they would have cameras that would help them walk around in their environment. And it is able to take your VR experiences out on the go with Google Cardboard, but it mostly makes you stay still most of the time. You can't walk around with VR. With AR, you can utilize the surroundings and add on to the experience, so you can walk around with AR at the same time. And it's usually found in smartphones. There are glasses and headwears, and some of them are still in development. And it let the user experience it more easily. And since it's a newer field, there's not much to use as far as AR goes, but it's rapidly growing. And some of the future uses that we have to look forward to, they're only going to get bigger and better and more advanced. They can be used in a bunch of different fields, including communication, education, online shopping, which would allow users to actually be able to see if a couch or something would fit in their living room, or if something would fit them, or how it would look on them. And you could also create and invent in new and exciting ways. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you for listening.